Shalom. Thank you all for coming to Odelia's Bas Mitzvah party. As I'm sure you're aware, her actual Bas Mitzvah occurred a few weeks ago on her birthday on the Jewish calendar, which was the 10th of Teves. The 10th of Teves this year also marks 2,600 years from the time of the initial siege of Jerusalem by the Babylonians, an event that was the precursor to the eventual destruction of our holy temple, the Beis Hamikdash. We observe it as a fast day and a day of remembering exactly what it was that had brought about this series of events. It is often hard to relate to these events that happened so long ago, and to try and understand it. And in thinking about it, I believe that there is probably a very good way, at least for Odelia and her sisters and brother, maybe to relate to this experience on an albeit lesser level, but still to be able to use an understanding through something that they have gone through. Thank God we have a wonderful relationship with our grandchildren and are very close to them, and we have a house that is in Baltimore. The process of us leaving Baltimore to come from Israel was one that was progressively more and more difficult until obviously the day that we finally left. At some point it became very real that all this talking that we had done for years about leaving Baltimore and coming to Israel was becoming a reality. Our focus changed, our talk changed, things were occurring that made it very, very real to Odelia and her siblings that the time was approaching. It became very real for them. We would speak about it more frequently. It was upsetting to all of us. We have such a close relationship, and there was going to be a tremendous distance that was put on that relationship. Then we got to a point of becoming closer where things really changed. We were living basically without furniture and sitting on borrowed chairs and using a card table, and had redone the house in order to be able to rent it out, and even the house had a feeling that things were not the same. It was very obvious that what was going to happen was very imminent. It was very close by. And then there was obviously the day itself of our leaving, which was fraught with tears and just very hard saying goodbye. It's so hard to say goodbye when there's such a close relationship, and it's just not going to be the same. We're not in our house anymore. We're not there, and this was terribly difficult. This experience is very similar, although on a much smaller scale, to what we as the Jewish people have experienced with the loss of our holy temple here in Jerusalem. That within this temple, it wasn't the walls, it wasn't the bricks, it was the fact that God's presence was there in this temple, and we as the Jewish people had such a tremendously close relationship with God. He lived right down the street. You wanted to go see God, you looked at his house, and there he was. It was that close. That's what we felt. The siege of Jerusalem was the wake-up call that all the talking that had been done for years by the prophets, by our Nevi'im, who had said that we needed to make changes within ourselves in order to become closer, in order to to fix those things that were problematic in the way that we were observing what it was that we were supposed to do, and they had warned us that the time was going to come when that Hashem would leave our presence. The siege of Jerusalem, the Pentecost, was the marking of the reality that it was time that this was happening. Much in the same way that Shiva B'Tammuz later on which was the breaking of the walls of Jerusalem, was an even bigger sign that it is imminent. What was dreaded and what was feared, and then finally with the destruction of the temple itself on Tisha B'Av, that the house of Hashem was burned and his presence was no longer felt, was no longer close. This is what it is that we remember, and by stirring these memories, by relating to these things, we look to continue to understand that even though Hashem is not in his house, we still believe in Hashem, we still know that Hashem is there, and we still look to be close. In the same way that we look to stay close with our grandchildren through Skype and through the telephone, that there are things that we can do to reach out and stay close and stay connected. So too, a Jew has a way of staying connected to God, even though he's not close, even though he's not around the corner in his house. He is still ever present and ever close, and desires to be close to his people for all time. The way that a Jew does this is by the performance of mitzvahs. God does not need us to do any of these things. It's not for his benefit that we do what we do. Keep Shabbos, keep kosher, learn Torah. These things are so important, not because Hashem needs us to do them, but because this is our Skype, because this is our long-distance phone call. This is our way of communicating with Hashem and remaining attached and close and feeling his presence close to us. And this is really the significance of the day of Odelia's Bas Mitzvah. What it is that she's now able to do is to be able to understand and have this desire to be close to God, to be able to do the mitzvahs with the idea that is bringing her relationship with Hashem, and that she can desire it and fulfill these mitzvahs for this reason. It's this age of understanding that she's reached. And I'm glad that she's been able to have the practice with writing emails and being on Skype and having a long-distance relationship with her grandparents to be able to really understand that she can remain connected to Hashem in this way also, and that we can all look forward to the day when we will be all reunited, Hashem in his temple, the Jews in their land, and Odelia and her siblings and her family with us here in Israel. Mazal Tov again.